Good day, everyone. Welcome to another week in Greek studies. We are here in Chapter 7 now, continuing to move along. We are talking about verbs again in this chapter. We last talked about verbs in Chapter 3, where we introduced the first two tenses of the indicative mood. Those were the present, if you remember, and the future. And very similar forms in both of them. The endings were actually identical in those. The only difference was the presence of a sigma in the future. Chapter 7, we're going to be moving now into past tenses. Both of these, imperfect and aorist, are past tenses in Greek. And so let's get into these and talk about what are the similarities, what are the differences, and what do these mean for especially translation. All right. As I mentioned, imperfect and aorist refer to past tenses in Greek, and each of these are distinctive in the way that they are constructed and used. The imperfect tense is the first one we'll talk about. The imperfect tense talks about something that happened in the past, but the imperfect emphasizes that it is something that is happening over a period of time. Okay, the action is either continuous or repetitive, something that happened over and over again in the past. Okay? One way to think about this is that the imperfect describes something like a video recording. Okay? These are two ways that we can translate the imperfect. There are more of them, but these are two basic ones that can very nicely illustrate the sort of the meaning of the imperfect. First, I was walking. Contrast that to I walk. I walk as present tense, and so I was walking now shifts this into the past. However, I was walking implies that this was something that took place over a period of time, right? It's a continuous action. I was walking for 6 hours yesterday, therefore I'm really tired. Okay? Emphasizing that this was something that was happening over the course of those 6 hours. The second one, they kept on walking, kind of emphasizes repetition. Okay? They kept on writing, they kept on moving. Okay, again, kind of talks about something that happened over a period of time in the past, and it emphasizes that kind of element of time. If you get this, then the aorist tense makes a nice sort of contrast. Okay, the aorist tense now is not going to be talking about action that happened over a period of time, continuously or repetitively. The aorist tense describes action in the past, and it is seen instead just a single point in time. Okay, think of a snapshot that records just a moment in time, and that's the aorist tense. There is no sort of emphasis on any kind of time period. The word aorist actually is, again, that Greek prefix, the a. Okay, kind of like atypical. Okay, this means not, and then the or is the Greek word for hour or time. And so this word aorist means not in time, not time. So it's not saying that any time is elapsing. It's just saying that something happened, there was an action that happened, and that's all we're going to be saying about it. All right, so those are the two past tenses. Now, the imperfect describes something that is happening over time, whereas the aorist is talking about not time, just the pure action. Okay? The aorist would be translated just as a simple past tense, I walked. Okay? Again, emphasizing just the action, not any kind of commentary on time. Okay, those are kind of that's an overview of the imperfect and the aorist. Now let's talk about the forms of them, because these are now quite different. The present and the future were very closely related. The imperfect and the aorist get a bit more complicated. First of all past tenses in the indicative mood And that is what we will be dealing with for these first 2 quarters. Up until the end of winter quarter, we will be entirely dealing with indicative mood verbs. Past tenses in the indicative take what is called an augment, and the augment happens before the stem, okay, at the beginning of the stem. In the future tense, we added a sigma to the end of the stem. The augment is what comes at the beginning. And so how do we form this augment? Okay, if the stem begins with a consonant, like the verb luo, lambano, therapuo, any of these verbs that begin with consonants, it's really easy. You just add an epsilon before the stem. Now remember, epsilon is a vowel, and so all of these forms that add an epsilon to the stem are going to require a smooth breathing mark. Okay. So you can see that there, the epsilon with the smooth breathing mark over it. If the stem begins with what we call a short vowel, either alpha, there's also a long alpha, but there's a short alpha, there's an epsilon, and an omicron. Those 3 vowels, if you have a verb that begins with any one of those letters, you take your beginning vowel and you do what we call lengthening it. Right? Short vowels have corresponding long vowels. Alpha and epsilon, the corresponding long vowel is an eta, and so the vowel that begins that stem will simply be changed to an eta. You do not add an epsilon with these. Okay, just lengthen that vowel to the long vowel eta. With an omicron, it will lengthen to the long vowel omega. Okay. And so, yeah, you just change the beginning vowel, the beginning letter, and that is what now gives you the augment. If the stem begins with a long vowel or a diphthong, then you don't change anything. All right. So with all of these, you kind of need to know what the original verb is. So make sure you're keeping up with your vocabulary, and so you know kind of what the basic dictionary forms of the verbs are. And then it will be a simple thing to add these changes on. Particularly with those short vowel lengthening to long vowel changes, you'll need to know the original form that it came from, because we're changing the letters and such. Okay, those are the forms, a few notes on the forms, and now let's get into the actual forms, what these things look like. Oh, wait a second. Let me give you some examples of these augments. The consonant stems, okay, an example of a verb with a consonant stem, therapio. To put an augment onto that, because it's a consonant, you just add an epsilon with a smooth breathing mark. And you get etherapu, and then endings depending on imperfect or aorist. Luo, just add the epsilon to the front of the stem. The next category are short vowel stems, and with these, again, take the short vowel and make it a long vowel. So ago, the short vowel alpha lengthens to an eta, and so you can see that in the new stem. With the verb hetoimazo, you take the epsilon and lengthen that to an eta. Okay, so you can see the eta actually replaces that beginning vowel. I did not think that you learned any verbs yet where they began with an omicron. Okay, there are some of them, and they take the standard pattern of lengthening to an omega, but I think all of the verbs that you've learned so far, you only have alpha and epsilon beginning the stems. The long vowel, hirisco, you notice there's no change. Okay, the only way that you would know that this was an imperfect or an aorist is what comes at the end. Okay, there are separate imperfect and aorist endings, and now let's get into those and what these look like. Okay, once you learn how to do the augments, then let's go on then to what the changes in the endings are in these actual forms. So have a look at this. This is the chart for the forms of the imperfect active indicative. You'll notice that I put here the augments all in red, and then the endings are underlined. So first person singular, add the epsilon to the beginning, and then the ending is omicron nu. So this one is eluon. Eluon. And this means I was loosing. Okay. Taking the action, putting it into the past, and emphasizing continuity or repetitiveness. Second person singular, elus. Okay, just epsilon sigma on the end. You were loosing. Third person singular, elue or eluen. Again, with that movable nu, depending on what follows this word, if it begins with a vowel, it will have the nu on it. If it does not, if it begins with a consonant, then it will not have the nu. Okay, elue or eluen. He, she, or it was loosing. Moving to the plurals, first person plural is eluamen. We were loosing. Second person plural, eluete. You plural were loosing. And then third person plural, eluon. They were loosing. A couple of things to note here. The first and second person plurals, notice the ending is the same as the present tense, okay, amen and ete. The only difference with those is that the imperfect will have an augment on the front. So it's eluamen instead of just luamen. Luamen is present, eluamen is imperfect. Another thing to take note of here is that the first person singular and the third person plural, that is not a misprint. Okay, the first person singular and third person plural are the same in the imperfect. This makes it a little bit easier to remember the forms because that's one less form that you have to learn, right? It's the same form. But when you're translating it, can make it a little bit tricky. If you see this one form, you have to decide from the context whether this is talking about I was loosing or they were loosing. Okay, there's not going to be any real clue in the sentence unless there is the subject is stated. If it's a plural third person subject, Peter and John were loosing, then obviously you have a third person plural. But that one form is going to be doing that double duty, so be careful of that one. One more thing to remember about the imperfect is that the imperfect stem is always the same as the present. In a lot of ways, the imperfect is considered very similar to the present. It's kind of built off of the present. And so you will never have a stem change in the imperfect active indicative. And that becomes important later. If you remember from your future tenses, there are some future verbs that undergo a slight stem change. Didasco changes to didaxo in the future. And then, as we'll see, there are other verbs that have some stem changes. But the imperfect, the stem will always be the same as the present, which is why this tense is kind of nice. All right, so those are the imperfect forms. Now let's look at the aorist forms now. To form the aorist, you begin, of course, by adding the augment to the beginning of the stem. It is the exact same thing as the imperfect, and the same rules apply. You have your consonant stems at epsilon. If you have a short vowel, make it a long vowel. Long vowel, no change. The first aorist stem is formed in a very similar way to the future. Okay? What we call the first aorist. If there's a first aorist, then by definition there should be a second aorist, right? That is the case. Okay, there are two different kinds of aorist tenses. The first aorist is kind of, it's the more regular form. Okay, so the way that you make this is you simply add the sigma to the end, and all those same rules governing the sigma still apply. If you need to, go back to chapter 3 and review these, but if your stem ends in P, beta, or Phi, when you add the sigma, it turns into a Psi. Stem ending in kappa, gamma, Chi plus sigma changes to a Xi. And then the tau, delta, theta with a sigma, that original letter, the tau, delta, or theta will drop out, and you're left with a sigma. Okay, so all of those same rules from chapter 3 apply when you put the sigma onto the aorist. That only applies to the first aorist. Okay, those are the only ones that you'll be adding a sigma to. There is, of course, a second aorist. If there's a first aorist, then yes, there has to be a second aorist. And the second aorist, there's a bit of a different process. Instead of adding the sigma, the second aorist will not have a sigma at the end of the stem. But what will happen instead is that they undergo a stem change. This stem change is pretty much unique to each verb. And the stem change, again, replaces the sigma. You do not have to worry about adding the sigma, doing any kind of amalgamation in the second aorist. Okay. However, you do need to memorize these forms because, yeah, for a lot of them, there's no real way there's no pattern to the stem changes. You just kind of have to know them. Fortunately, most of the second aorist stem changes are, they stay kind of recognizable. Okay. A lot of them, they just get shortened, okay, by one letter or by a few letters. A couple of them add letters. But yeah, then there are few second aorist verbs that have some very profound stem changes. Okay, and those ones are a little bit more difficult, but we'll talk about those later. The other thing to remember about the second aorist is that the second aorist takes endings that are the same as the imperfect. Okay, the first aorist takes slightly different endings from the imperfect, but the second aorist takes identical endings to the imperfect. The only way that you know the difference between a second aorist and an imperfect is that you have the stem change in the second aorist. As I mentioned before, with the imperfect stem is always identical to the present tense. The second aorist stem is going to be changed, and that's the only difference between the imperfect and the second aorist. Okay, that stem change. Otherwise, they both take augments, and then they both take the same set of endings. So those are some notes on how to form the aorist. Now let's look at some examples. Okay, this verb, the verb luo, is a first aorist verb. Most of your verbs are going to be one or the other. Okay, there are a few verbs that annoyingly have both first and second aorist forms, but fortunately those are few and far between. Most verbs are going to be either first or second. Luo, for example, is only a first aorist. There are no second aorist forms for luo. So what are the aorist forms for this verb? You see first person singular elusa. Here I've highlighted in red both the augment at the beginning and then the sigma at the end of the stem. And then after the sigma, you place the first aorist active endings, which are very similar to the imperfect endings, with one exception. That first person singular is quite a bit different. Yeah, and the other thing that distinguishes these is that you have a theme vowel of alpha going all the way through. All right, so elusa with the alpha ending there. First person singular, I loosed. Okay, again, aorist tense, we're going to translate this as a simple past tense. Second person singular is elusas, you loosed. And third person singular, elusen. Notice this one does not have an alpha in it. Okay, that's elusen or eluse. She, he, or it loosed. Moving to the plurals, first person plural, elusamen, we loosed. Second person plural, elusate, you loosed. And third person plural, elusan, they loosed. So notice the giveaways for the first aorist. The first aorist is not difficult to recognize, right? First of all, you have an augment at the beginning, then the sigma at the end of the stem, and then the endings all pretty much have alphas going through them. They're pretty much your basic imperfect endings, but instead of omicron or epsilon, there are alphas, except in that third person singular. Be careful of that one. All right, something to note about the first aorist. Normally there is not a stem change in the first aorist, but there are a few verbs that will undergo a slight stem change, and it's actually the same stem change that they undergo in the future. Okay, just instead of the present tense endings, you're going to have an augment at the beginning and then the alpha endings at the end. But the verbs that take stem changes in the future will also take stem changes in the first aorist. However, even though these are stem changes, they are not considered second aorist because they still take the sigma, they still use first aorist endings, and the stem changes are so small, that they're pretty insignificant. All right, it is not difficult to recognize these first aorist words, even the ones that have stem changes on them. Okay, I've given you a couple of examples of verbs like that. Okay, didasco in the aorist goes to edidaxa, and baptizo becomes ebaptisa. All right, so those are your first aorists. Learn those endings really well and know how to form them. Okay, what the difference is between this and, say, the present tense. Let's then move to the second aorist, moving on from the first aorist. As I mentioned before, the second aorist, the characteristic of the second aorist is that there is a stem change. With all of these, there's going to be some kind of stem change. And consider the verb lambano. What we learned that one in, chapter 4. Lambano, I take or I receive. In the second aorist, this verb will change to lab. Okay, the stem change is from lambano to lab. And so have a look at these forms and these endings here. Okay, first person singular, elaban. Now, as I mentioned before, the second aorist takes imperfect endings. Okay, so elaban, I took. Second person singular, elabes, you took. Third person singular, elaben or elabe, she, he, or it took. Then in the plurals, we have elabamen, we took. Second person plural, elabete, you took. And third person plural, elaban, they took. Okay, those are your forms of the second aorist indicative. Take a look at those. And as I said before, you're going to have to learn the stem change with each verb. This stem change only works with lambano. Okay, it does not work with any others. There really isn't any other pattern with this. So yeah, you'll just have to learn each stem change as it comes. The vocabulary will tell you what the stem change is. All right, so I'll learn those endings very well and those forms, and also note the translation. Right, again, this is a simple past tense. This is slightly irregular past tense in English. From take becomes took. So again, that is the second aorist verb lambano. All right, stem changes are going to be unique to each verb, but once you get the stem change, then this pattern stands. Okay, those endings, the augment, just add those to the change stem, and you've got the second aorist. Okay, something that I need to tell you is about this one verb, ginosko. Gnosko, these forms are very irregular. Okay, the endings, in fact, are totally irregular. There's no other verb like this. And the book has this annoying tendency to print some very important stuff in sort of like almost footnotes or fine print in the textbook. And so it's very easy to miss this stuff. Okay, you can just be reading along, and there'll be like some fine print underneath a chart, and you can just very easily like just skip over that. Okay, yeah, just a word of warning. In this textbook, a lot of the stuff in the fine print is super important, and so don't skip over it. They do give you these forms, but yeah, they're not in a nice form chart like this, and so I thought I would give this to you. The word gnosko, okay, I know, has some really weird second aorists. Okay, so you have the stem change from gnosko, it becomes gno, gamma nu omega. And, this is from words like Gnostic or Gnosis or any kind of thing like that. The G and O kind of, root in English. Yeah, this is your aorist form of Gnosko, I know. Okay, so we're going to put the augment on, and it's just like a regular augment. That stem begins with a gamma, and so it's a consonant, and so just add an epsilon to the front. In general, these forms follow kind of the second aorist forms, okay, but they're a little bit weird. Okay, notice the first person singular there, right off the bat, is just a nu. It's attached onto the stem change, possibly because the change stem ends in an omega, like in a vowel already. They just add the nu. Instead of omicron nu or alpha nu, it's just a nu. Okay, so egnon means I knew. Second person singular, egnos. Again, there's no connecting vowel here. Okay, you just add the consonant right onto the stem. Egnos, you knew. And third person singular, egno. Really no ending on that. Okay, it's just the stem, egno. He, she, or it knew. Moving to the plurals, egnomen, we knew. Second person plural, egnote, you knew. And third person plural, egnosan, they knew. Notice that ending there. The third person plural, it kind of reverts back to a first aorist ending. You've got a sigma on the end there, and then alpha nu. So this verb is just really, really weird. And you kind of have to learn this as just, an exception to really any pattern. It's kind of both first and second aorist, but the endings really are not common to either one of those patterns. Okay. I don't know why this one verb does this. I don't know where these endings come from or why they look that way. All right, a note on these second aorist stem changes. Okay, again, there's no pattern to this. Because you know one does not mean that you know another stem change. But fortunately, most of the time, these changes, they are pretty recognizable as the original verb. For example, the verb lepo, when it comes to the second aorist, you just drop off the epsilon there at the second letter of the stem, which is an epsilon, and it just becomes lip, okay, lambda iota p. That is now the second aorist form that you're going to build off of. And so to that, then, of course, add an augment, and because it's a second aorist, then you're going to be using the same endings as the imperfect. Elip on, elip s, elipe. The verb ago, the stem changes to agog. It basically just takes the stem and makes it a little bit longer by duplicating the letters. Instead of just alpha and gamma, now it's alpha, gamma, alpha, gamma. With the verb montano, it shortens to moth. So those are a few examples of these. As you can see, there really isn't any pattern. There's no way that you can pattern this out. They're just kind of arbitrary changes that each verb makes. But fortunately, yeah, you're going when you go from the change stem back to the original verb, it's not too much of a change. But there are a few verbs that take stem changes, and they don't look anything like the original verb. For example, the verb lego, I speak or I say. In the aorist, it changes to epsilon iota p. Apon is the aorist form. Why it does that, I'm not sure. The verb harao, which we don't even know this one, but it comes out in, I think, chapter 17. But this word means I see. And the second aorist form is given in your vocabulary for this chapter. Even though the present form we're not going to learn until chapter 17, they do give you the aorist form because this form is it's pretty common. It appears a lot in the New Testament. Okay, it's epsilon iota delta. So adon is the second aorist form. You have apon, which goes with lego, I said, and adon, which goes with harao. Okay, so adon is I saw. Harao is I see. Adon is I saw. The last of these examples that I'll give to you, the verb pharaoh, changes in the aorist to anenkon. Eta, nu, epsilon, gamma, kappa is the stem change. Yeah, why do these verbs do it? I'm not really sure. For whatever reason, in a lot of languages, this happens. Okay, you think about English, go, the past tense of go is went, and yeah, why does that happen? The past tense, we looked at it already, the past tense of take is took, the past tense of bring is brought, and so yeah, in English we have the same thing. Okay, you have these stem changes, and sometimes the stem changes are just totally weird and off the wall. What linguists think happened with some of these words is that there were two separate words that kind of meant the same thing. They may have been synonyms, or they may actually have meant the exact same thing. And over time, one of the forms dropped out of usage. So, for example, with the verb lego, there may have been a separate form, that was a kind of regular aorist form that was built off of that. But for whatever reason, that aorist form of lego, it stopped being used. And so they took the aorist form of a completely separate word and ended up associating it with this verb lego. Okay, which is why apon, the aorist, looks so much different than the present tense lego. All right, I mentioned before, yeah, English does that. Spanish does this too, right? Spanish, the verb ser becomes soy, eres, es, right? In the when you're changing it, to the present tense forms, when you have other verbs that do stem changes and such. So yeah, you have these all of these strange forms, and a lot of times, the strange forms are some of the most common verbs in the language. Okay, which makes it extra, extra annoying. But yeah, it's just part of learning a language. I don't know why, but just about every language does this. Okay, and yeah, Greek does the same thing. So yeah, when you're learning the vocabulary, maybe if you're using flashcards, if you're using some kind of computer program to memorize this vocabulary, maybe put down in addition to the definition of the verb, put down also like the second aorist stem change if it has one. All right, the past tense of a me, okay, the to be verb. First person singular is a main. Like the present tense, these forms are all kind of irregular and weird. Okay, but yeah, this is how you say the past tense of a me. It's technically an imperfect, but really, yeah, it's just the past tense form of the to be. Okay, first person singular, a main, I was. Second person singular is just ace. Okay, eta sigma, you were. Third person singular, ein, she, he, or it was. Moving to the plurals, first person plural, amen, we were. Second person plural, eta, you were. And third person plural, asan, they were. All right, your imperfect forms of the to be. This slide gives you some practice identifying imperfects or aorists. Okay. This one, you might want to save this exercise until after you've gone over the vocabulary, because I think some of these verbs may have been introduced in the vocabulary for this chapter. For example, ebalon. I believe this comes from balo. Well, I know it comes from balo. I think this was introduced in this chapter. I don't have my textbook in front of me right now. But yeah, you might want to wait on this. Some of these forms might be totally new to you. But yeah, let's go through these. The first one, ebalon. Ebalon is imperfect. Okay, this is a unchanged stem. The present tense stem is beta, alpha, lambda, lambda, omega. Yeah, that's the ending. And so you take the unchanged stem. We're putting on the epsilon augment, and then that on ending comes from the imperfect. Okay. So the tense is imperfect. The person and number, well, that ending is ambiguous, right? It can be first person singular or third person plural. Next word, akusamen. How does that look to you? Is that imperfect or aorist? Let's look at this one. Okay, the augment here appears in the form of the long vowel eta. This is, of course, from the verb akuo. And so the alpha in akuo lengthens to an eta. We do have the presence of a sigma at the end of the stem, as well as the alpha in the ending makes this a first aorist. And look at the ending there, amen, that is a first person plural ending. So I should give you the definition of these. Ebalon, in the first person singular, that it would be I was throwing. Balo means I throw. So imperfect, I was throwing. Or this ending could also be third person plural, so they were throwing. All right, the second word there, akusamen. First aorist, first person plural. We heard. Aorist is just a simple past tense. Next word, epempson. Which one is this? Is it an imperfect or an aorist? And of course you notice that the ending, or the end of the stem, has changed. Right? That psi there indicates the presence of a sigma. The p at the end of the stem merged with the sigma to make a psi. So you have a first aorist on this one again. And the ending there, alpha nu and pempson, is a third person plural. They, what is it? They sent. Pempo is I send, epempson, they sent. Next word, agrafete. Agrafete. This one is from grapho, I write. And is this one aorist or is it imperfect? It is imperfect. Okay, we have the augment, epsilon, at the beginning of the stem. There is no stem change. There is no sigma. Okay, therefore, this is imperfect. Agrafete, the ending is second person plural. And so this means you, plural, were writing. Imperfect. Okay. You, plural, were writing. Next word, agagamen. Agagamen. This is from ago. And is this imperfect or is this aorist? Okay, I told you that it was from ago. And so notice this has a changed stem. Okay, instead of ag, it is now agog. And so that stem change makes it a second aorist. Okay, the eta is on there because the stem is alpha, gamma, alpha, gamma. The alpha at the beginning changes to an eta. There is no sigma in the second aorist, and the ending is the same as the imperfect, which is a first-person plural ending. Okay, Augmen. Aorist, first plural. All right, ago, of course, I lead. So aorist, first plural, we led. We led. Next word, edidascus. Edidascus. Is this imperfect or is this aorist? On this one, this is imperfect. Okay, you have an augment at the front. There is no sigma at the end of the stem, and there is no stem change. The ending is epsilon sigma, which is second person singular. Didasco is I teach. Didascus, second person singular, is you were teaching. You were teaching. Imperfect. Last word on this list, anenkan. Anenkan. This is one of those very irregular aorist forms. It is from the verb pharaoh, I bring or I bear. The ending is first person singular or third person plural, just like the first example, ebalan. Alright, so even though it's aorist, it uses imperfect endings. This could be either one of those. If it is first person singular, it is I bore or I carried. If it is third person plural, they bore or they carried. That is an example of one of those really weird ones, and again, if you don't know that, if you don't know the stem change, there's no way that you would get what this word meant. There is, at least for me, I don't know, maybe maybe you have a really great brain or something, and you can figure that out, but I wouldn't be able to figure out how Anenkan came from pharaoh. It's just one of those that you have to kind of memorize and learn. So those are the forms of the imperfect and the aorist. Hopefully that's not too much. I know that was a lot of information to drop on you. But yeah, these are some pretty common uses in the New Testament. So take some time and memorize those. Let's go to the practice sentences now. I'll do the first few here with you. Okay, number 1. Elusan hoi apostoloi tus doulos. What's the first thing that we want to do? Let's get all the forms of the words here. Okay, elusan is a verb. It is a first aorist verb. Notice the sigma at the end of the stem and the alpha nu. Makes it first aorist. The ending there is third person plural. Next word, hoi, is the definite article, the. It is masculine plural nominative. Apostoloi also is a noun. It is masculine plural and nominative, just like the article. So those two things are going to go together. Okay, hoi apostoloi. Next, you have a definite article, tous. Tous is masculine plural accusative. And it goes with the next word, which is the noun. Noun is also masculine plural accusative, so these words are associated. The rough translation, sort of just working out the vocabulary terms, elusan, they loosed, hoi apostoloi, the apostles, tous doulos, the slaves. That doesn't make much sense into English, so let's clean that up and make a final translation. The nominatives there, hoi apostoloi, are your subjects. The verb is loosed, so we're going to have the apostles loosed. And then tous doulos is the accusative, and that gives you the slaves, okay, the objects of the verb loosed. Okay, if you're ready to move on, number 2, eidamen tous macarius huius. edamen tus Macarius huius. Let's get all of the forms of the words. First word is a verb, edamen. This is a second aorist. It's one of those really weird, profoundly changing second aorists. And the ending is first person plural. Next word, tus, is the definite article. The form of that is masculine plural accusative. Next word, Macarius, is an adjective. This one is also masculine plural accusative. And then the noun, huius, is masculine plural accusative. Okay, so all of those are related to each other. The article, the adjective, and the noun. Looking at the position of that adjective, if you remember from the lesson last chapter, there are three choices in using adjectives. You have your attributive, predicate, or substantive. With this adjective, notice where it is. Okay, you have the article tus and the noun huius. Macarius is in between those. So this forms a nice little hammock, and the adjective is kind of relaxing in the hammock right in between those, which makes this an attributive adjective. Okay, a rough translation of this. Edamen is we saw. Okay, first person plural we. The second aorist form of to see is I saw. So we saw. Tus Macarius huius, the happy sons. And yeah, that's pretty much it, right? The final translation. We saw the happy sons. You have to get the subject out of the verb in this one. There is no nominative in this sentence. So, edamen, we saw. Then, Macarius is an attributive adjective, so it's describing the sons. We saw the happy sons. Next sentence. Ekeroutson hoi mathetai hamartolois. Ekeroutson hoi mathetai hamartolois. Let's get the forms of all of these words. Ekeroutson is the verb. It is a first aorist verb. Notice you have the augment. You also have the presence of the sigma, even though there isn't a sigma, but it's there in the xi at the end of the stem. And the alpha nu ending also tells you that it's aorist. Okay, that ending is a third person plural. Hoi is a definite article, masculine plural nominative. Mathetai is a noun. It's one of the weird first declension nouns that is masculine. But you know that because it goes with the article hoi. Masculine plural nominative as well. And then the last word, hamartolois, is a noun. This one is masculine plural, but it is dative. So this one is not related to mathetai. All right, rough translation. Ekeroutson, they preached. Hoi mathetai, the disciples. And hamartolois is from the word sinner. So plural would make it sinners. You've gotten the vocabulary. Now write out the final translation. Okay. Where are the nominatives in this sentence? There are nominatives. Hoi mathetai. So that's your subject, the disciples. The verb is ekeroutson, preached. And then hamartolois is dative, so you can say to, by, or for. Yeah, to is probably best here. All right. So yeah, to sinners. Hamartolois is from the word sinner. Okay. The disciples preached to sinners. I think this is the last one of the practice sentences that I have for you, and you can complete the translations. But here you have tus panerus esozen hakurias zoes. Tus panerus esozen hakurias zoes. First stage of this, get all of the forms of the words. Tous is the definite article, masculine, plural, accusative. Panerus matches up with that. It's an adjective, also masculine, plural, accusative. If you have an adjective that has an article, but it has no corresponding noun, what kind of a form is that? That makes the adjective a substantive. And if you'll notice in the sentence, there are no other masculine, plural, accusatives. So this, then, panerus, is a substantive adjective. Next word is esozen. This is your verb. It is from the verb sozo, I save. Notice there is no stem change on this. There's no sigma, and so this is going to be an imperfect, esozen. The ending is third person singular. The next two words look like they are associated. First one, ha, is the definite article, masculine singular nominative. Kurios is a noun, also masculine singular nominative. The last word there is zoes. Zoes is a noun. It is feminine, it is singular, and it is genitive. Work the vocabulary out now. Tous panerus, the evil. Esozen, he, she, or it was saving, imperfect. And then ha kurios zoes, the Lord of life, or the right now just the Lord life. Okay, genitive though does suggest some ways of translating this. Your final translation then, look for the nominatives. Nominatives in this case are completely at near the end of the sentence. Okay, ha kurios, the Lord. And then zoes, the genitive is then there with the Lord. Okay, what does genitive say? Of, and then zoes is life. Okay, so the Lord of life is the subject. What is the Lord of life doing? Esozen is the verb. So the Lord of life was saving. And then what is left? Tous panerus. This is an accusative on both of them. Masculine, plural, accusative. Panerus is there by itself. There is no associated noun. Therefore, this is what we call a substantive adjective. And yeah, the way that you translate that, the evil, and then you can supply a form of the noun based on what is the gender and number. Okay, the gender and number of panerus is masculine, plural, and so you can put in there the word ones. You could put men if it demanded, the context demanded it. Yeah, the Lord of life was saving the evil ones, or the evil people, or the evil men. All right, I hope that was helpful to you, this chapter. A lot of stuff here, but hopefully you'll be able to get it without too much of a problem. There isn't a whole lot here that is like super hard or super complicated. Yeah, I hope that you're able to get those and complete the work for this chapter. Continue the good work. I believe I got some progress reports to you. If there was anything outstanding, I let you know what it was that you needed to do. So you can get those in pretty much any time, and I will have a look at those. All right, everyone, have a good rest of your day. Have a good rest of your week. And yeah, take care, and we'll continue working here in the textbook and learning more about these words.